Well, the biggest misconception they come up with, frankly, is, oh, there's this technology that's a silver bullet that's going to do everything I need. And since it does everything, I don't have to even bother to define what I need.
Is it usually an issue of the organization already has the data they really need in place? Or do you find that there tends to be gaps in the data in terms of accomplishing what they already want to do?
Well, that's actually an interesting question, right? So
today on the pod, we'll be talking to David Raab. David is founder of the CDP Institute. He's going to help us to understand why it's so important for organizations to really start by focusing on the problem, keeping the problem in the front to make sure they can move forward with the technology they choose. And then we'll talk about maybe moving away from the phrase customer data platform and really more talking about data services in order to properly accomplish the goals organizations have for themselves. And then David gave us a nice warning, the importance of not looking for that one silver bullet to solve all your problems, but really looking more broadly and holistically to make sure you're building a good infrastructure that will move you toward the future. We're very fortunate to have David with us today. Let's get started. David, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We're really happy to have you on the show.
yeah, always a pleasure.
You know, it's great to have you here because of the expertise you bring to our audience. Data is such an important component to building that digital customer experience, and in particular, where we like to focus here on the show on that post-click experience. And a key component to that for many organizations has proven to be the birth of the customer data platform, or the CDP, an area in which you have, of course, vast expertise. It's interesting when we talk about technology and tools, we try to make sure to encourage our listeners not so much to focus on the tool, but more to focus on the problem. And often as marketers, we kind of get a little bit enamored with kind of the shiny tool and making it all about that. So I know in talking to you in previous conversations, you like to reframe the question and not so much to be, do I need a CDP? But to help people more focus on the problem they might have and how a CDP or another tool might help them to solve the problem. Is that something that you commonly deal with as you kind of deal with the people you've consulted with?
Your role as a consultant, of course, is to help people make a good choice. And so that's where you always start out is, well, what are your problems? What are you trying to accomplish here? And then you're hopefully drawing on your vast experience and saying, okay, well, if this is the problem, this is the type of tool or the tool that you need to address that. So it always comes down to use cases. We're all obsessed with use cases. Every consultant is obsessed with use cases.
What are those use cases that you kind of end up seeing most commonly as you deal with kind of enterprise organizations when it comes to data?
Well, it generally does vary. Usually someone will bring you into an enterprise who has a particular problem, so they want better data to select advertising audiences, or they want to do website personalization, or they want to do email segmentation, or in my life, they're going to be usually marketing use cases just because that's where I live, but it could be customer support. It could be, of course, something having nothing to do with customer data, though I wouldn't usually see those problems. So, it's going to vary. Key CDP use cases are the ones that I just mentioned. It's usually about segmentation, unifying data. I mean, people bring you in to talk about a CDP because they know I have this data over here and that data over there, and I really like to bring them together. For retargeting, for example, I want to look at the people who had a drop shopping cart and send them an email, but it takes 2 days to get the drop shopping cart data from my website into my email system, and I think a CDP might be able to do that more quickly, or I want to do that more quickly. And CDP sounds like a solution, but if there's some other solution that would do that better for them, of course, that's fine too.
Do you find that as you try to solve those problems around trying to stitch together new data sources, is it usually an issue of maybe the organization already has the data they really need in place and they just need it aligned and stitched together better? Or do you find that there tends to be gaps in the data in terms of accomplishing what they already want to do?
Well, that's actually an interesting question, right? So someplace the data is going to exist usually. There's something that just doesn't exist. We don't know intent on prospects. Oh, okay, I can't. CDP is not going to help you much if you don't have the data. So again, where I get brought in is where somebody already knows that data is there. They just kind of can't get their hands on it. So But then the data being there and the data being accessible and usable are not the same thing. So just to stick with that drop shopping cart example, okay, that shopping cart is captured presumably in the, the web system someplace or other, but is it captured in a place that you can extract it? Is it captured in a format that's usable? If it's just buried in a weblog, which is kind of natively where it's going to be collected, that's very, very hard to pull it out and make something useful. So you have to then put some sort of a tag on the website to capture that particular action and push it out really outside the weblog directly into some sort of a data store that eventually will end up presumably in a CDP where you can then use it. So it's not so simple. Does the data exist? Yeah. Does it exist in a usable form? Not necessarily.
For the sake of our listeners, let's kind of take a step back because we're going to dig more into a CDP and what it can actually do and accomplish. But I guess if you had to give a definition of a CDP to someone who's kind of new to the space, new to understanding customer data or other types of data, how would you define a CDP?
Well, we have a very specific definition and packaged software that builds a unified persistent customer database accessible to other systems. And I think at this point I could say that in my sleep because I've been repeating it for 9 years now, actually more than 9 years. Um, More broadly, people think CDP is like wherever I put my customer data. They don't really attach quite so detailed a technical definition to it as I do. And really, where we're headed, and this is a topic of current discussion, is moving away from that technical definition to talk not so much in terms of CDP as a system as companies needing customer data services. So services is really a list of capabilities or requirements or functions that people need to have delivered, and whether they delivered it in a unified system that has a persistent database, or whether they deliver it by loading it into a warehouse, or whether they deliver it by capturing interactions directly through a streaming mechanism or whatever. There's lots of ways actually to get those functions or those services delivered, and that's what we need people to focus on. The term CDP, as I'm sure you're aware, is uh, now been used by so many people in so many ways, and and sometimes even attacked as, CDP is dead, it's obsolete, blah blah blah. That it's almost harmful to use. We're actually kind of thinking, we can find a better term that doesn't carry quite so much baggage right now. That again shifts the focus from technology to functionality, because that's what people need to focus on. It's actually a mistake to get, this architecture is better than that architecture. It's like, well, that's really very situation dependent. And anyway, as a marketer, you don't really care. You just want to know that you're getting the functions that you need. So that's what you need to focus on, and let the technicians worry about the best way to deliver it.
What do you think, just in your years of experience in doing this, what do you think was really the kind of the catalyst to that shift? Because when CDPs kind of first came out, it was very much all about the platform. It was about, I'm going to put this CDP in place, right? I need to get whatever. I need to get Telium. I need to get whatever CDP flavor of the week there was. What do you think was the catalyst that kind of caused that shift away from saying, well, maybe it's not necessarily the platform, and certainly in some cases it certainly still is, but it's really about the services and what those services can accomplish.
Well, I think 10 years ago, and CDP, I defined it in 2013, so it's now 12 years ago. That really was the best technical approach to use. There really weren't too many options. If you were going to build customer profiles, you pretty much had to pull them out into a separate system because there was no place else to do it. Since then, other viable technical approaches have emerged, right? Cloud data warehouses being the obvious one, but there are others as well. So there's legitimately more variety in the ways you can accomplish it. So the idea of defining CDP as a system, as a particular technology approach, simply it's not as important as it was. It's not. So it makes sense to move away from that. It makes sense to put the focus back on functionality, which again is where it always should have been. It was kind of convenient that there was one technical solution because then we could focus on it. But now that there are more than one potential technical solutions, that's okay. And it lets, again, the users get back to what they should have been looking at all along, which is, well, what do I really need to accomplish?
So that makes me think, I wonder, as you see people have a need for being able to pull data from different sources, stitch together, make sense of it, whether it's looking at it from a service standpoint or from a platform standpoint, which is really kind of secondary to saying, well, what's your problem first? What are the kind of the misconceptions that you kind of see in the market, especially from marketers, when it comes to kind of presenting those problems and thinking, okay, this is how we need to solve it?
Well, the biggest misconception they come up with, frankly, is, oh, there's this technology that's a silver bullet that's going to do everything I need. And since it does everything, I don't have to even bother to define what I need because, hey, it's probably going to do it. It's like, you can, the real world. And it's like, well, any car will get me to the grocery store. So I don't have to like define specifically how far do I live from the grocery store. And, is it uphill or downhill? And what's the speed limit and all that? Yeah, I know the car. So I don't have to worry about that when I buy a car. But see, it's a little different with CDPs, right? Because they don't all do the same thing. And the other solutions, even more so, don't all do the same thing. So I do have to worry about exactly what it is I'm trying to accomplish, what I'm going to use this for, and make sure that I select a solution or, assemble a solution from multiple components that somehow or other has everything I need. It's just much more important to start with those requirements than it was when the technology was a little simpler.
So if a marketer is kind of taking the charge on this, right? So maybe they're the one reaching out. They're the one saying, hey, I feel like I have this need. These are the things I want to accomplish. As you mentioned, be personalization. It could be maybe, triggered campaigns, a number of other, potential use cases. Who would you recommend that marketers kind of bring to that table to sit down and kind of assess, okay, what exactly are our needs? Who are the players in the enterprise organization that should be there and contribute to that vision of what we're trying to accomplish?
Well, when it comes to defining marketers' needs, the marketers kind of have to talk to marketers, right? They're the ones who know what they need. Usually there's a data team in a large organization and they're aware of what the resources are. Obviously, there are IT people who are aware of what the technology resources are. They're not going to tell you your needs, that they can more tell you what's available already, which you may not even be aware of as a marketer, and what can be done relatively conveniently by the organization, what technical resources there are. So they are certainly players, but they don't define your requirements. Usually within a large organization, of course, the marketing department itself has multiple sub-departments or divisions or whatever. You got the media guys over here, the email guys over there, the web guys over here, service guys. They're not part of marketing, but they're certainly a player if you're going to think about larger customer experience, sales, obviously. So there are all lots of players who will have requirements. Part of the challenge you run into with the CDP project traditionally has been scope creep, right? Say, oh, we're going to do this thing. And everybody else outside of marketing or even within the other parts of marketing, oh, wow, really? You can do this? Well, I need this. I need that. So then the list of requirements gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Then it gets harder and harder to find a solution and to prioritize, and things get bogged down politically and blah, blah, blah. It's life in a big organization.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So you get the players at the table, you're having this conversation, right? You're figuring out this is what's available. This is what we can do. Again, you're a marketer, maybe you're not very technical. So you're trying to kind of suss this out and understand it. Again, you've probably heard this term CDP. Maybe you've read some LinkedIn posts about it, things like that. You've read different companies. One kind of area that can become gray oftentimes for marketers is we're talking about a CDP, and then other times we're talking about a CRM. Can you give us kind of what the distinction is there between those two kind of platforms?
Sure, they're very, very distinct technologies. And CRM is another type of system, okay? But CRM is designed essentially to capture one-on-one interactions. The model is there's an agent, usually traditionally on the phone, maybe in person, maybe nowadays, interacting through web chat or something, or they're, an AI agent doing the same thing, but they're talking to one person. So the system is designed to pull up all the information about that person, to capture the interaction itself. Here's my notes. Here's what we said. Here's what they asked for, blah, blah, blah. And then store that so the next agent who comes by and talks to that same customer has access to that information. So it's very much designed around a one-on-one, really person-to-person interaction. Totally different from what a CDP does, right? A CDP is designed to deal with bulk records of your entire customer base all at once, and to select them and analyze them and find customer segments, and do other stuff that really has nothing to do with what a agent does when they're talking to you on the phone. Um, the problem is that there is some confusion, or not so much now as there used to be, uh, because they both do have customer data, right? And of course, there will be vendors or users who have the CRM and say, well, we have that data. Surely this is just a matter of running some queries against our database. And how hard can that be? Well, the answer is actually pretty hard, because the CRM database itself was not designed to do that. You design databases to do different things and to be good at different things. And a database that's designed to optimize pulling up all the data on an individual customer to support a face-to-face interaction is a very different design from the design that's meant to scan the whole data set and pull out segments and analyze them as groups. So you really can't use the same thing. Now, again, technology evolves, and at least some of the cloud database guys say, yeah, we can do it all. Yeah, sort of, kind of. They're better at it again than they were 10 years ago. Whether they're really optimal, probably not. So, but then you really get into the technical weeds. Like, we'll put a little cache over here, and we'll put a index there, and then we'll instantiate a virtual view. And and the marketers, of course, their eyes glaze over immediately. No matter how technical they are, hell, my eyes glaze over, and I'm pretty technical. They say, can it do it or can it do it? I don't care how you do it, which is absolutely the wrong thing to say, because, well, of course it can do it. It's just going to, be 10 times less efficient, right? So oh yeah, we can do it. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg, and you're not going to like the performance, and you're going to be limited. But yeah, we can do it.
Yeah, it's funny. We run into that situation all the time, right? Where it's like I'm not worried about the details or being in the weeds. I just want this to perform. But you want this to perform over time. You want this to scale. You want it to iterate, right? And when all those things happen, the kind of foundation you put into place plays a significant role in its ability to do that and to grow and evolve moving forward, right? eh, you're gonna build onto a house. You want the house to have good bones, so to speak, right? That allows you to be able to say, okay, we can make modifications and enhancements to this home. But if the house doesn't have those good bones, that good foundation, right, that good structure, there's not much you can do. And it's just like, you know what, you're better off just tearing the whole thing down and starting over again. So, that same principle, right, really applies when it comes to what you're doing with data. What are those systems? What's the infrastructure you're putting in place to be able to stitch, to manipulate, to push and pull those different data sources? And if you're not building a solid infrastructure to be able to do that, when you start to ask different and new questions that maybe didn't exist a year ago or 2 years ago, and it's just like, well, it's not at all set up to do that. Like, is that, that's going to be problematic, or that's going to take a lot of time. It's going to be very expensive, right? And those are the kind of challenges that oftentimes you run into when you don't kind of stop and think things through at the beginning to build that kind of structure, right?
Exactly. That's exactly it. Like your house analogy, and I'm thinking about, oh, we don't have to tear out the foundation. We'll just drive some steel piles all around it to support this thing above it. But we don't have to tear it down. But people do that where I live, because if you tear down the house, the taxes go up. But if you leave up one wall, then it's technically not a rebuild. So we have lots of houses around here where I live where there's like this one old wall that doesn't really do anything, but they couldn't tear it down. In any event, I love how old houses. And the other thing about CRM is, it's an operational system. It's designed, as I say, to gather the data during those interactions. It's not really designed as an analytical system, and it's just one data source. Your web data doesn't go into your CRM. Your email data doesn't go into your CRM. There's a lot of data that is not generated natively by the CRM. And a lot of CRM systems were not designed to import that data from other sources. And then getting back to your technical issues of how you structure it. So it's totally the wrong application for a CRM. The CRM really is just one source for your CDP or your warehouse, if you prefer to load your data into a warehouse. Uh, and really even the people who complain about CDP being obsolete, they're not saying use your CRM. They're saying load it into a warehouse, and then use the warehouse exactly the same way that you would have used the CDP, because everybody kind of acknowledges you need to pull the data out of your source systems and put it into some other data store that's designed for, let's just call it bulk data management.
Is that now? It's interesting you say that because I think one of the things that's become more maybe amorphous or confusing about kind of the CDP market is probably when things first started out, it was pretty clear cut. Here's a CDP. This is what it does. Here's your use case. Rock and roll, move forward. Where now you have people, right, wrong, or indifferent, who and I say people, I mean companies, organizations, technology providers who use that word CDP very freely, right? And there's varying degrees of strength in terms of what it can and can't do, right? So some are good about activating data and actually doing something with it. So maybe actually triggering communications or actually driving personalization. Others are maybe what you would consider to be more pure play, where it's just like, no, 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 no. Look, we don't do anything with it. We stitch it, and you tell us where you want to put it, and we're kind of done. Like we're not about activating the data, right? Um, have you found that a proliferation of different CDP tools, or maybe more accurately, tools that kind of use the term strongly or loosely CDP? Have you found it to be kind of problematic in kind of walking people through what they do and don't need?
Yeah, again, that's part of the reason where I'm just come to the point where I say, let's not even use the term anymore because, or let's, what I really would want to do is say, CDP has a very specific meaning. It's a particular type of system, as I was just describing. So use it to mean that. But if you want to mean this broader thing of the thing that provides my customer data and makes it usable, which is, really kind of what people have come to mean when they say CDP, use a different term. And again, use customer data services and say, I need customer data services. And these are the specific services that I need because I already have an identity resolution engine in place. I already have a segmentation engine in place. I already have whatever in place, warehouse in place. So there are things I don't have. Here's my list of 10 services and I have 5 and I need 5 more. So let me go out and find those 5 more and don't even call, don't even label it because you're not buying a system at that point. You're buying, a bunch of services, components, functions, whatever you want them, whatever you want to call them. So just call them that and don't get hung up on labels because the minute you get hung up on labels, you run into all these issues that you were just talking about. I mean, previously, our approach to that was to say, well, a CDP is a CDP. Now, if you want activation, there are some systems from companies that sell CDPs that also do activation. They also do analytics. So, okay, so you have an analytics CDP that builds customer profiles and does analytics. You have a campaign CDP that builds profiles, does analytics, and does, uh, campaign management. You have a delivery CDP that builds profiles, does analytics, builds campaigns, and delivers messages. You even have an operational CDP that does all that and has your operational functionalities as well, like a reservation system or something. Any of those kinds of systems can include CDP functions, again, building persistent customer profiles. So we've always said, well, you just kind of like look at we can take the vendors in the market and we say, well, what's the scope of functionality of your system and the kind of a CDP that we call you? But, if you're a reservation system or an email, messaging system and you've built in a CDP, it's a little silly to call you a CDP, right? It's like say, oh, I have this thing that is, a rear view mirror. I'm going to call it. Yeah, it happens to have an automobile attached, but it's really the rear view mirror, the radio that I care about. It's like, well, no, it's not a radio. It's really a car that has a radio. And, in the same way, yeah, okay, it's an email system that happens to have a CDP. So
That's great because that kind of brings us full circle, right? Because again, it all starts with what are you trying to solve here? Like, what's the problem? What's the use case, and what are you trying to do? And depending on kind of where the weight is of the challenges and problems you're having, well, then this is the strength that you're looking for. Are you looking for an email tool that happens to have these components of of managing data, or are you looking for a true data platform, or more accurately, data services? Because it's not so much that you need something to send out emails. You have an ESP. You already have a CRM. Perhaps you even already have a data warehouse, right? But your problem is that your data is just in a number of disparate sources across the organization, and you really need something that's just going to bring that together so that you can, therefore, send that data to your email service provider and send something out. You can send it to your personalization platform so that it can personalize that experience as people come to the site, right? So again, as you mentioned at the very beginning, and we're kind of beating this drum, it's all about starting with what is the fundamental problem or the problems that the organization has. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish and drive? Great. Now, what infrastructure do you currently have in place? What tools do you have in place to help you solve some aspects of that problem? And then what data services can we use to help kind of fill those gaps, right? And round that out in a structured and organized way that will allow you to scale, and that will allow you to evolve and iterate over time.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. So you put it that way, it's so simple, right?
I don't know why people have a hard time with it. I mean, it's clear. I'm not sure what the trick is. Now, you can go down so many rabbit holes, right? And really get lost in them. Again, is this a CDP? Is this not a CDP? Do we need one? Whatever. I know another rabbit hole from a data perspective that a lot of times marketers and others as well will get themselves caught in is this need to have this kind of complete view of data, right? Like we need all this data all brought together, all stitched, all perfectly kind of aligned. Tell me, in your experience, is that reality? Is that fantasy? What have you seen with this goal, this strive to say we want this complete and total view?
Right, and yeah, you've answered your own question implicitly. Of course you don't, right? There's certainly some data you don't need, and the trick is to figure out which data you need and again, how you're going to use it, right back to use cases again, and to kind of prioritize that and make sure that you bring in that sort of minimal set of data that can meet your initial requirements. Now, reality is that minimal set of data is usually like half or three quarters of what you got there. So it doesn't really say, oh, there's two data sources I can bring together. I mean, in a specific case like the retargeting case, okay, I have the one data source. It's just that drop cart history out of my web system. That's the only data source I care about. And my problem is not really bringing together, in that case, even multiple data sources. Just I can't get my hands on it quickly enough to send the email out within 5 minutes. So the CDP's role there isn't so much to combine data, it's just to move data more quickly than I could do otherwise. And there are a number of use cases like that. But, as you begin to accumulate use cases, because you're going to look at least a few in your initial planning stage, you say, well, I need this data, I need that data, the other data. And you usually kind of find, some kind of core set of data sources, which are the most important that serve a bulk of use cases. And then there are some peripheral ones that, might just meet one or two needs, or maybe it's a matter of bringing another department. I want to bring in my service records, and I don't need them unless I'm going to support my service people. And then there's a whole bunch of data actually in a service department. It's not one data source. So there's this whole clump of data that I have to bring in all at once to meet their needs. But I don't. If all I want to do is again retargeting, I certainly don't need service data to do that, right? I just do what I do. Right? In that case, there's a lot of other data I don't need if all I want to do is retargeting. Now the trick is I'm never only going to want to do retargeting. I am going to want to do at least a bunch of other use cases. So you have to look at a broad enough range of use cases when you're planning out to make sure that you are designing a system that will meet those kind of future requirements without getting like obsessed with the really obscure edge cases. Well, what about people who are under warranty and they moved and, something got okay, you may not capture that because you may not have the address change data in there and then, match it up against the warranty data. And maybe that's not worth the trouble, 'cause even though it's actually kind of a good market, but that particular example. But, there are going to be obscure things like that. You really want to think about the cost of that and what you're going to do with it, because sometimes it's just not literally financially worth it to add that particular data source.
Yeah, one of the things that we often encourage our clients to do is, to have some semblance of a vision of kind of like, where do you want to take this? And it's not that it has to be incredibly robust. It's not that it has to be, some 50-page document, but just have a high level roadmap of kind of like, what's the direction you want to go? How do you want to take this? To your point, we want to move to from retargeting. We want more personalized communications. We want to do on-site personalization. Okay, are you looking for one-to-one personalization? Are you looking just, to target different segments of customers and be able to speak to different segments correctly? And what's the order of that, right? Like, well, hey, we're just satisfied to be able to talk to people who, left something in their cart. And eventually we like to get to the point where we're talking to David or we're talking to Shamir and we're looking at their history with us and we're recommending products and services based on that, right? So just having that semblance of, okay, like where do we want to go? Just map it out, maybe 5 steps or 10 steps and saying, here's where we want to go. That at least gives you some structure to your point of kind of saying, here are the 5 or 10 or 3 or whatever the case is, major use cases that we want to be able to attack and accomplish. And that's a starting point, right? That's something that you can now use to say, okay, now if we're looking at these data services and these solutions, we know they need to solve these 5 use cases, these 5 challenges or problems. And to your point, kind of dismiss and ignore, at least initially, and maybe all the time, and more than that, those fringe use cases that just aren't going to come up very often. You have whatever 100,000 customers. You're not going to really worry about these 20 that exist in some subsegment of some group that have that particular need, right? So really keeping that focus on kind of what's the larger vision, what's the roadmap, what's this destination, and we're not going to worry about every rock and pebble we're hitting along the way to get to that destination.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to, not totally ignore the future, because that's a mistake people make. Is they just define a half dozen simple things, and that's all they look at, and then they do those, and then they want to go to do something else, and they say, "Oh my goodness, the system can't do that." And like, well, you never said you wanted a system to do that, so who to be mad at, other than yourself? But again, you can't take the extreme of, "Oh, well, it has to be able to do everything I can never imagine." That doesn't work either. So again, you got to think. I mean, it's not easy. You have to prioritize these things. You have to kind of think them through, and again, not just think through. Any marketer worth their salt can make a list on a whiteboard of all the cool stuff I'd like to do, but what's the value of that? What's the difficulty of that? Do I have the other components in place? And even if I had the data available, do I have the skills available? Do I have the content available? Do I have the products to even sell that would meet that need? There's lots of other things that need to think through. And that's non-trivial. That's, again, part of, what a good consultant will help you kind of work your way through.
So, that's a good one to kind of wrap up our conversation. So, I'm a marketer. I'm listening to this conversation right now. And let me paint a picture. I'm a legacy enterprise brand. The company's been around for a while. We have all kinds of data, but it lives in a bunch of different places. Many of the systems are proprietary systems. I'm trying to modernize this thing. I'm trying to drive and create a modern digital experience, right? I'm trying to create site personalization. I'm trying to have trigger communications based on interactions. How do I get started? How do I kind of wrap my head around this and kind of say what are the first couple of steps on that path to get to where I need to get to?
Yet again, right, start with the use cases, but we won't beat that one into the ground any further. The second step after use cases is looking at your existing capabilities and seeing, what can my current systems do? What can my current people do? Capabilities are as much about people as they are about systems. And that's what leads me to my gaps, right? And then once I know the gaps I have to fill, now I can go out and try to find solutions that fit those gaps. So, to your example, from a legacy organization, and all my systems are ancient, maybe I do want this one CDP that includes everything from data management out through, message delivery and campaigning and all that. But if I'm in a big organization and there are different departments and the email guys really like their email tool, they're not going to be all that interested in getting a new email tool just because there's a cool CDP that happens to have one, right? So again, that's not a gap in that case. So that drives a lot of what people buy and why they buy it. And the challenge is if you're a vendor and you have some companies who do want that email tool, you have the email tool to make them happy, right? Or make your sales guy happy. Because your sales guy says, "Oh, we would have got this sale if we didn't have an email, if we had an email tool." So now you've added this email tool that I don't know, 80% of your clients don't want, right? Um, and that's a problem because now you've invested resources in that, and now you're selling that, and you're kind of positioning yourself, "Oh, we have the best email tool." So yeah, it's tricky, and that's why breaking things up into modules or components, as the cool kids now say, actually makes a lot of sense. Now, technically, you may or may not have designed it that way. Sometimes it's just a matter of like hiding the interface. Oh, it's there. but you didn't pay for it because it's modularly priced for separately. So I'm just not going to turn it on for you. And other times it really is literally, a separate component that gets installed or uninstalled or whatever. And as a marketer, you don't care. What do you care? The technicians will care because there's integration issues when they're separate components, but the marketers are like, I don't know, either I need it or I don't. Either I turn it on or I don't. So when we look at, that's how you end up with a market where at least 3/4 of the CDP vendors do have all these delivery capabilities. Not that 3/4 of their clients of CDP users need them. It's just that somebody at 3/4 of the companies was told that we have to add that feature, so they added it, and now it's there, whether they deliver it or not.
Yeah. And right. And that's where the real challenge comes for marketers, because you've got to kind of see the wheat for the weeds, right? Because you can't get too enamored by those things, because if it's a provider that is added on this tool because of some particular request or something like that, what's the roadmap for that component? How much are they investing in that? How much is that email service kind of keeping up with the market and its capabilities around email services, right? Because if that's not the core competency of the technology, how much are they investing in that moving forward, right? So those are the questions you're asking yourself to kind of make you take a step back and say, oh, okay, what do I really need here? Let me maintain my focus. And that way that kind of keeps me from getting distracted by the vendors and all the bells and whistles they can kind of throw at me and distract me with.
Yeah. Or actually, I worry about the other thing, that they are putting a lot of effort into their email tool, and I don't need it. And so are they investing enough in the core features that I really care about? And that's, frankly, I think more of an issue in many cases, because we got this. We got the data assembly. That's a commodity, which it's not, but people think it is. So let me do all the cool bells and whistles stuff, because that's what demos well. And that's part of the problem with CDPs anyhow, is that the money is in the messaging, right? That's you run campaigns and they generate revenue. Building customer profiles. That's just a supporting technology that doesn't generate revenue. Nobody's going to pay me because I have good customer profiles. So it's hard to kind of justify that investment just in the profiling, even though nothing else works. So you got to do it, but it's hard to sell, hard to get people excited about.
David, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for the education. Great education, great understanding for people who are kind of new to this world and are trying to navigate and figure it out. We really appreciate having you.
Okay, well, cdpinstitute.org, lots of good data there.